the world certainly didn't forget South America, and there are many other countries which are in trouble. If we add Central America, we look at Guatemala, we look at Nicaragua, we look at Haiti, a nation of 11 million people who are for a year now in deep trouble. Haiti has nothing anymore. Haiti has existed through agriculture and fishery, and Haiti is forgotten by the world because there's so many other problems in the world. If you go down into South America, you mentioned Colombia. Colombia had a peace process beginning in 2016, where the FARC, the revolutionaries, the rebels in Colombia, who were causing a lot of damage, a lot of problems to the central government, they decided to have a peace process, and they signed a peace contract, which then was not really realized as much as they had hoped. There have been great problems between the central government and the rebels who gave up their weapons and gave up their rebellious fights. So they're now coming back into action, and nobody knows what kind of damage they will cause. If you go another country like Chile, Chile has been, because of copper, is a very copper-rich country. Chile is a very well-funded country. They have money. They are wealthier than other countries in South America. And just because of a raise of 4 pennies or 4 cents of the metro ticket in Santiago, a rebellion started by the students first, who didn't agree with it. They occupied metro stations. The army went in there eventually. An army against students is also always ridiculous and dangerous. Then they came with water cannons and repression. And this revolution, this rebellion, not a revolution, but a rebellion, went into another phase. It went into the phase of saying, there's so many inequalities in these countries, including Chile. The pensions were low, the people were not paid very well, so the president now, who's a billionaire himself, just to appease the people, raised the pensions, raised the various social issues. So why didn't they do this before? Why do they have to have a rebellion before they see that people suffer? And this is true for most of the countries in South America, that you have inequalities. And these inequalities have not been, how do you say, erased over the years, over the decades of South American history. They always have been in turmoil one way or the other in South America. And you had left-wing governments as Allende. You had left-wing movements in Nicaragua, and all these left-wing people like Maduro in Venezuela, they have tried and they failed. The right-wing nations, governed by right-wing people, they tried and they failed also. So the problem which we're facing now, as you mentioned, Venezuela. Venezuela is a very rich country, theoretically, oil-rich country. It's one of the largest reserves of oil in the world. And they're poor. They're running out of medicine, they're running out of food, they're running out of everything, and nothing is changing. These upheavals, as I mentioned, are not all suddenly. These upheavals have been around in one country or the other. If you look at Brazil, a marvelously huge and in many ways very rich country, has the same problem. Brazil, the left-wing former president is in jail. For whichever reason, he's in jail. There is no how do you say, balance between the left and the right. There either is black and white. Either the black is leading and they're repressing the left, or the left is trying to get all the money from the rich. So there's never a very balanced way in South America of finding solutions. There are very few countries in South America which are peaceful or are trying to be peaceful in their social attempts to find solutions for their people. So you have so many different shadows of problems in South America. You have countries, as I said, Venezuela, extremely rich. You have problems, even in Brazil, extremely rich in many ways, because the inequality is there and the people are not distributing the money as they should do. So they have tremendous social problems, schooling, food, pensions, health insurance, health in general, hospitals. It's all not there. So it is a tremendous project and it takes a long time to find solutions. The answers to the conflict is that the nations are trying to find solutions in distribution, as I said, of wealth, of finding a system which is functioning for all the people, not only for the wealthy ones and the classe bourgeoise, which is very powerful also in South America. If you look at Brazil, the president of Brazil at this time is practically marching in the footsteps of Donald Trump. He has the same language of Mr. Trump. He is also denying climate change. The result of that is that there is no really action of the Brazilian government to curtail the fires and the burning of the forest in the Amazon. Because why do they not stop this? Because they're, for example, the Chinese now, who have told the Brazilians, we need soybeans, we need lots of soybeans, we don't rely on the United States on soybeans anymore, which means they're burning more forest because they have to have plantation, they have to have space for planting these kinds of food, which is a very short-term idea of Brazil, because it's affecting the whole world and the climate change in the world by burning in Amazon. But would there tomorrow be a left-wing president? Would he be better and would he be more ecology-minded? Would he be more global in his ideas? Possibly not. There is a very great problem in South America of the people. The masses are growing, there are more and more people coming. If you want to include other nations which have problems, you go to Nicaragua, you go to Guatemala, and you go to Cuba. In Cuba, for example, if you ask about solutions, Cuba is suffering because there are sanctions by the Americans. Cuba is also suffering because there are sanctions by the Americans against Venezuela. Venezuela was the provider of oil to Cuba. So Cuba does not get any petrol anymore on a cheap price, and maybe not at all. So who is helping? Then we come to another problem. Who is helping Venezuela to survive with their very rigid, repressive, oppressive president? It's Russia. So why is Russia involved in Venezuela? Because Russia has bought oil and is buying oil from Venezuela and has invested tons of money into Venezuela. So they don't want to lose their investments. So they help Venezuela to remain there, because it also bothers the Americans to see Russians active in South America, which was considered, the backyard of the United States. So they have Cuba, they have Bolivia. Bolivia also has a problem, a left-wing government which just ran the elections. They apparently won. Nobody knows whether they did. Possibly they won, but forcibly they cheated. Probably they cheated, but nobody knows and nobody will find out. There'll be maybe another rebellion coming up in Bolivia. So we are facing in South America many problems. The press and the media does not really report because it's so far out of the way. It is not strategically important. It's much more important today, the Middle East, Asia, Europe, but South America is not, for the rest of the world, that important.